circumstances in which he found himself placed. "Why should Mr. Camperdown interfere?" continued Lizzie. "If they don't belong to me, they belong to my son, and who has so good a right to keep them for him as I have? But they belong to me." "They should not be kept in a private house like this at all, if they are worth all that money." "If I were to let them go, Mr. Camperdown would get them. There's nothing he wouldn't do to get them. Oh, Frederick, I hope you'll stand to me, and not see me injured. Of course I only want them for my darling child." Frederick's face had become very long, and he was much disturbed in his mind. He could only suggest that he himself would go and see Mr. Camperdown, and ascertain what ought to be done. To the last he adhered to his assurance that Mr. Camperdown could do no evil, till Lizzie, in her wrath, asked him whether he believed Mr. Camperdown's word before hers. "I think he would understand a matter of business better than you," said the prudent lover. "He wants to rob me," said Lizzie, "and I shall look to you to prevent it." When Lord Fawn took his leave, which he did not do till he had counselled her again and again to leave the matter in Mr. Camperdown's hands, the two were not in good accord together. It was his fixed purpose, as he declared to her, to see Mr. Camperdown, and it was her fixed purpose, so at least she declared to him, to keep the diamonds in spite of Mr. Camperdown. "But, my dear, if it's decided against you," said Lord Fawn gravely. "It can't be decided against me if you stand by me as you ought to." "I can do nothing," said Lord Fawn in tremor. Then Lizzie looked at him, and her look, which was very eloquent, called him a poltroon as plain as a look could speak. Then they parted, and the signs of affection between them were not satisfactory. The door was hardly closed behind him before Lizzie began to declare to herself that he shouldn't escape her. It was not yet 24 hours since she had been telling herself that she did not like the engagement and would break it off, and now she was stamping her little feet and clenching her little hands and swearing to herself by all her gods that this wretched, timid lordling should not get out of her net. She did, in truth, despise him because he would not clutch the jewels. She looked upon him as mean and paltry because he was willing to submit to Mr. Camperdown. But still she was prompted to demand all that could be demanded from her engagement, because she thought that she perceived a something in him which might produce in him a desire to be relieved from it. No, he should not be relieved. He should marry her, and she would keep the key of that iron box with the diamonds, and he should find what sort of a noise she would make if he attempted to take it from her. She closed the morocco case, ascended with it to her bedroom, locked it up in the iron safe, deposited the little patent key in its usual place around her neck, and then seated herself at her desk, and wrote letters to her various friends, making known to them her engagement. I cannot say that you are very kind to me, and I don't suppose you care very much what becomes of me, but I think it right to let you know that I am going to be married. I am engaged to Lord Fawn, who, as you know, is a peer, and a member of Her Majesty's Government, and a nobleman of great influence. I do not suppose that even you can say anything against such an alliance. I am your affectionate niece, Elizabeth Eustace. Then she wrote to Mrs. Eustace, the wife of the Bishop of Bobsborough. Mrs. Eustace had been very kind to her in the first days of her widowhood, and had fully recognised her as the widow of the head of her husband's family. Lizzie had liked none of the Bobsborough people. They were, according to her ideas, slow, respectable, and dull. But they had not found much open fault with her, and she was aware that it was for her interest to remain on good terms with them. Her letter, therefore, to Mrs. Eustace was somewhat less acrid than that written to her aunt Linlithgow. My dear Mrs. Eustace, I hope you will be glad to hear from me, and will not be sorry to hear my news. I am going to be married again. Of course, I am not about to take a step which is in every way so very important without thinking about it a great deal, but I am sure it will be better for my darling little Florian every way, and, as for myself, I have felt for the last 2 years how unfitted I have been to manage everything myself. I have therefore accepted an offer made to me by Lord Fawn, who is, as you know, a peer of Parliament, and a most distinguished member of Her Majesty's Government, and he is, too, a nobleman of very great influence in every respect, and has a property in Ireland, extending over ever so many miles, and running up into the mountains. His mansion there is called Kilmage, but I am not sure that I remember the name quite rightly. I hope I may see you there some day, and the dear bishop. I look forward with delight to doing something to make those dear Irish happier. The idea of rambling up into our own mountains charms me, for nothing suits my disposition so well as that kind of solitude. Of course, Lord Fawn is not so rich a man as Sir Florian, but I have never looked to riches for my happiness. Not but what Lord Fawn has a good income from his Irish estates, and then, of course, he is paid for doing Her Majesty's Government, so there is no fear that he will have to live upon my jointure, which, of course, would not be right. Pray tell the dear bishop and dear Margarita all this, with my love. You will be happy, I know, to hear that my little Flo is quite well. He is already so fond of his new papa. Lizzie's turn for lying was exemplified in this last statement, for, as it happened, Lord Fawn had never yet seen the child. Believe me to be always your most affectionate niece, Elizabeth Eustace. There were 2 other letters, one to her uncle, the Dean, and the other to her cousin Frank. There was a great doubt in her mind as to the expediency of writing to Frank Greystock, but at last she decided that she would do it. The letter to the Dean need not be given in full, as it was very similar to that written to the bishop's wife. The same mention was made of her intended husband's peerage, and the same allusion to Her Majesty's Government, a phrase which she had heard from Lord Fawn himself. She spoke of the Irish property, but in terms less glowing than she had used in writing to the lady, and ended by asking for her uncle's congratulation and blessing. Her letter to Frank was as follows, and doubtless as she wrote it there was present to her mind a remembrance of the fact that he himself might have offered to her, and have had her if he would. My dear cousin, as I would rather that you should hear my news from myself than from anyone else, I write to tell you that I am going to be married to Lord Fawn. Of course, I know that there are certain matters as to which you and Lord Fawn do not agree, in politics I mean, but still I do not doubt but you will think that he is quite able to take care of your poor little cousin. It was only settled a day or 2 since, but it has been coming on ever so long. You understand all about that, don't you? Of course you must come to my wedding, and be very good to me, a kind of brother, you know, for we have always been friends, haven't we? And if the Dean doesn't come up to town, you must give me away, and you must come and see me ever so often, for I have a sort of feeling that I have no one else belonging to me that I can call really my own, except you, and you must be great friends with Lord Fawn, and must give up saying that he doesn't do his work properly, Of course he does everything better than anybody else could possibly